Usually when we sit down to crack open a new source for one of these deep dives, we're dealing with something anchored. You know what I mean? We look at a piece of legislation, a white paper on some new tech trend, maybe a standard biography of a guy who died, stayed dead, and, ended up as a statue in a park.
Right. Safe, contained history, the kind where the dates are all fixed and the footnotes are all in order.
Exactly. But the document we're looking at today, it feels, I don't know, radioactive.
That's a good word for it.
It's called The Secret Biography of Fu Hongwu by Dixon Kinqade. And if you take this text at face value, and look, I'm not saying we should, but if you do, it completely breaks the timeline of reality.
It shatters it. It's like finding a history book that has extra chapters written in invisible ink.
It really is. Because this isn't just a biography in the traditional sense. It's framed as a confession.
A journal, a first-person account from a man who, according to every other history book, died in the year 1398.
And we are talking about the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty in China. A guy who should be, dust and bones.
Just a name in a textbook.
But this document, it claims he didn't just survive his own funeral. It claims he hacked the biological system, achieved a form of functional immortality, and is currently operating in the modern world.
And he isn't running a charity or some quiet think tank?
No, far from it. The premise is that the beggar emperor, the man who literally saved China from the Mongols, has evolved.
He's evolved into a criminal mastermind. It reads like a supervillain origin story, but it's written with the granularity of a PhD thesis. I mean, it covers tax codes, military strategy, chemical formulas. It is incredibly dense.
That's what struck me. It sounds like Pulp Fiction, the emperor who lived forever. But then you start reading the details, and it's all surprisingly grounded.
Disturbingly so.
So what is our mission here today? I mean, are we debunking a myth? Are we reviewing a novel? Where do we even start?
I think our mission has to be psychological. We need to trace the evolution of a mind. How does a human being go from being a starving peasant to the most powerful man on Earth?
And then, this is the terrifying part, decide that humanity isn't worth saving anymore.
Exactly. It's a roadmap of cynicism, a complete and total descent.
From altruism to...
nihilism.
To absolute cold detachment. So I think we need to walk through the 6 stages of this life, as laid out in Kincade's text. From the mud of the Yellow River all the way to the opium dens of the modern underworld.
Okay, so buckle up. We're going to see if the logic holds, even if the physics probably shouldn't. Let's start at ground zero. All one. The Forge. Because before he was an emperor or a myth or a criminal, he was just a kid named Zhu in Henan province.
Right. And the text says he didn't start at the very bottom, which is a common misconception.
Yeah, you hear peasant emperor and you picture someone born in a ditch.
Exactly. But Fu Hongwu, or Zhu as he was then, was actually born into the rural elite. His father was a local warlord, a father of the warlords, as the text puts it. And what did that mean back then? A warlord wasn't just, a thug with an army.
No, not at all. He was the local government, the military, and the bank, all rolled into one. They lived in a fortified village. This was a position of immense local power.
So he had security, he had a future, he wasn't worrying about where his next meal was coming from.
He had the iron rice bowl, as they say.
Yeah.
His path was set. He was going to study the classics, pass the civil service exams, and become a bureaucrat in the Mongol administration.
A life of structure and expectation.
A comfortable, predictable life.
Yeah.
But then nature decides to completely rewrite the script.
The Great River. The text describes a flood in 1344. And we're not just talking about a wet basement kind of flood, are we?
No, this is cataclysmic. You have to understand the geography there. The Yellow River is suspended above the surrounding floodplain by centuries of silt deposits. So when the levees burst, it isn't a rising tide.
It's a falling ocean.
It's a wall of water and mud moving at incredible speed. In minutes, the entire fortified village is just erased. His parents, his brothers drowned.
Wow.
The text describes him standing in the mud, the only survivor of a wealthy, powerful family that vanished in a heartbeat.
That has to break a person. I mean, psychologically. To go from the warlord's son to absolutely nothing in an instant.
And the context here is so important. This isn't modern China with disaster relief and NGOs showing up with blankets. This is China under the late Yuan dynasty.
The Mongol rule.
Right. And by this point, the Yuan dynasty is collapsing from the inside out. The mandate of heaven, that divine right to rule, is clearly slipping away.
So you have the flood.
But you also have locust swarms devouring the crops. You have the bubonic plague ripping through the population, and you have mass famine everywhere. The The whole country is apocalyptic.
And Fu Hongwu is thrown right into the middle of that grinder. The text says he spends a year just begging.
Holding out a bowl.
Yeah.
Starving.
Yeah.
Being ignored by people passing by.
Yeah.
The future emperor of China.
And the source claims this was his true education, more important than any classic text he ever studied.
It was. Because he saw the suffering of the common people, not as a statistic in some government report, but as a lived, daily reality. He realized that the government in Beijing didn't care if the peasants lived or died.
He saw the bones of the unburied dead, as the text puts it.
And that resentment, that anger, becomes the engine that drives the rest of his life.
Yeah.
He isn't just hungry for food anymore, he's hungry for justice. Or maybe revenge.
But he doesn't stay a beggar forever. He finds a lifeline, a Buddhist monastery.
Right, the Huangju Temple. Which sounds peaceful, doesn't it? You imagine meditation, incense, maybe raking some sand gardens.
A place of quiet contemplation. But according to Kinqade's analysis of this biography, this wasn't a retreat.
No, this was a training camp, a survivalist compound.
A survivalist compound.
Think about it. In that era of chaos, the government couldn't protect anyone. So these monasteries, they often had to be self-sufficient and fortified. They had to be able to defend themselves.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the abbot there sees something in Fu Hongwu. He doesn't just see a starving refugee. He sees a high-functioning mind, a gift for assimilating knowledge, and this burning rage underneath it all.
So they don't try to pacify him, they sharpen him.
They put him through a very specific curriculum. They build him a toolkit.
Let's break down that toolkit, because this is what builds the future emperor. It's like he went to a very dark, very practical university. First on the list, psychology.
But not Freud, obviously. This is applied Buddhist psychology, understanding the nature of desire, fear, and attachment.
The levers of the human mind.
Precisely. And the text makes a crucial point. He never became a true believer. He remained a skeptic at heart. But he learned how to hack the human mind. He learned that people are fundamentally driven by fear and greed. If you know what a man fears, you own him.
So he's weaponizing empathy. He understands you not to help you, but to dismantle you.
That's a perfect way to put it. So that's the first skill. Then there's combat.
Right, the secret arts of temple protection.
This wasn't just for show. This was qigong for internal strength, staff fighting, brutal unarmed combat, life or death, close quarters fighting techniques. He's becoming a warrior monk.
Okay, so he can manipulate your mind and he can break your body. What's the third piece?
Medicine. And this is so key for the later chapters of his story. He learns herbology, acupuncture, anatomy. He learns how the body works, how it heals.
And implicitly how it breaks.
Exactly. So look at that triad of skills. He can manipulate your mind, he can win any physical fight, and he can heal you with medicine.
It's the God complex starter pack. You have the power to kill, to save, or to control.
And for a few years, he just waits. He's in the monastery, absorbing all this knowledge, sharpening the blade, until the inevitable happens.
The outside world crashes in.
The Yuan government forces, the barbarians, as he calls the Mongol army, attack and burn the temple to the ground.
They destroy his second home, his sanctuary, which pushes us into part 2 of his life, the rebel.
He can't hide anymore. He has no choice but to pick a side.
So he joins the White Lotus Society. Now, for listeners who aren't, steeped in 14th century Chinese history, what was the White Lotus Society?
They were essentially a doomsday cult, a secret society that mixed Buddhist and Manichaean beliefs.
A doomsday cult, okay.
Yeah, they believed the Maitreya Buddha, the Prince of Light, was about to descend to Earth, wipe out the Mongols, and usher in a new golden age. It was very apocalyptic, very revolutionary.
So he joins this cult. Does he drink the Kool-Aid? Does he start believing in the Prince of Light?
Never. Not for a second. He uses the Kool-Aid.
Ah.
He sees the White Lotus not as a religion, but as a pre-built distribution network for rebellion. He realizes that faith is an incredibly powerful motivator for soldiers. Men who think they're fighting a holy war for a god will fight much harder and more fearlessly than men just fighting for a paycheck.
That is incredibly cynical.
Or incredibly pragmatic, depending on your point of view. And it works. He rises through the ranks with stunning speed because, frankly, he's the only one who can actually strategize.
Most of the other leaders are just fanatics or bandits.
Right. They're driven by passion. He's driven by cold logic. He eventually orchestrates a merger, bringing the White Lotus under the umbrella of the larger Red Turban movement.
That's a corporate merger, basically. He's acquiring startups to build a conglomerate of rebellion.
A conglomerate of violence. But his greatest weapon wasn't the sword, or even his strategic mind. The text claims he discovered his superpower during this period.
And that was charisma.
but a very specific kind of charisma. He says in the journal, "I could make others do my bidding with little more than a few compelling words." He realizes he can project this aura of destiny, of inevitability.
He makes people want to follow him into battle.
And he pivots his branding. This is crucial. He stops acting like a bandit chief and starts acting like a traditional Confucian gentleman.
That's a fascinating pivot. He's leading a peasant army, but he's speaking the language of the elite. He's telling the landowners and the scholars, hey, I'm not here to burn everything down. I'm here to restore order.
It's a brilliant move. The elites, the gentry, they were terrified of the peasant revolts. They saw it as pure anarchy. Fu Hongwu comes along and tells them, no, I am the return to tradition. I am the defender of the Han people and true Confucian values.
He signals stability.
And that gets the money and the brains on his side. He's playing both ends of the spectrum, the religious fanaticism of the peasants and the conservative desire for order from the elite. Nobody else was doing that.
So with that coalition, he secures his base of power in Nanjing. He calls it a kind and righteous government, which, sounds great on a banner.
It's great PR.
But he still has a massive obstacle. There's another more powerful warlord in his way.
Warlord General Chen Yuliang. He styled himself the King of Han. This guy controlled the central Yangtze River, which was the economic heartland of China. If Fu Hongwu wanted to rule the whole country, he had to go through Chen.
And Chen had the bigger army, the bigger fleet. On paper, he should have won.
He absolutely should have. This all comes to a head at the Battle of Lake Poyang.
The source describes this as the largest naval battle in history. Is that just Kinqade being dramatic?
I mean, in terms of sheer numbers of personnel, it's right up there.
Yeah.
You're talking about hundreds of thousands of sailors and soldiers. And the ships were incredible. These massive tower ships, floating fortresses. They were practically small cities on the water.
Wow. And the battle lasts for 3 days?
3 days of hell. The lake essentially turns into a sea of fire and blood. It's just relentless, brutal combat.
And Fu Hongwu wins. How?
Not just by brute force. He uses strategy, he uses fire ships, an old tactic, but he executes it perfectly. He waits for the wind to change direction, sends in these small boats packed with explosives, and turns Chen's massive fleet into an inferno.
He uses the environment, meteorology as a weapon.
He uses everything. He outthinks Chen at every turn, and once the smoke clears, Chen is dead. His fleet is destroyed, and Fu Hongwu is the last man standing in southern China.
And this is the moment the text highlights that his behavior shifts again?
Yes. After this battle, he stops fighting personally.
He hangs up the sword for good.
He realizes he's too valuable to the movement to die in some random skirmish. He's the brain of the operation now, not just the muscle. He directs the war from his palace in Nanjing.
And he sends his generals north to finish the job.
Exactly. He sends them to drive the Mongols out of the capital, Beijing. And by this point, the Yuan dynasty is so weak that they basically pack up and flee back to the Mongolian steppes without much of a fight.
The war is over.
The war is over. And he stands in Nanjing and claims the mandate of heaven. He declares a new dynasty, the Ming, and he takes a new name, the Hongwu Emperor.
Which means vast military.
A name that signals exactly how he got there. And his family name, which he adopts, Fu, can mean a continuous return.
Which, in hindsight, knowing where this story goes, is a heavy, heavy bit of foreshadowing.
It's almost a confession in itself.
So he's done it. Part 3, the
Yeah.
emperor. He is the CEO of China. And initially, he seems to run the country like a man who remembers exactly what it was like to starve.
He really does. For the first part of his reign, he launches what you could almost call a Robin Hood administration.
Yeah. How so?
First, land reform. He seizes vast tracts of land from the unscrupulous gentry, the guys who had exploited the chaos, to buy up land for pennies on the dollar. And he redistributes it to small, independent farmers.
He wanted a nation of smallholders, not a few mega landlords.
His economic philosophy was that agriculture is the true source of all wealth. He wanted to empower the people who actually worked the land.
And the anti-slavery policies, that really stood out to me in the text.
That's a huge deal. During the chaos of the late Yuan period, many Han Chinese had been captured and enslaved by various factions. He orders the immediate release of all innocent people who had been forced into slavery.
He goes even further than that, right?
Yes, he uses the state treasury to buy back children who had been sold by their desperate, starving parents during the famines. He's actively trying to reverse the damage of the last few decades.
He's healing the trauma of his own childhood writ large. He couldn't save his own family from the flood, so he's trying to save everyone else's families from poverty and desperation.
That's a great reading of it. He wants to create a society where A catastrophe like a flood doesn't mean the end of your entire bloodline. And to do that, he needs control. He needs data.
Which brings us to the yellow records and the fish scale records.
Right. Fish scale records. Can you explain that one? It sounds like an inventory for a restaurant.
It's a great metaphor for the maps. They drew the land plots for tax purposes, and the plots were so detailed that on the final map, they overlapped slightly, like the scales of a fish.
Ah, okay. So it's about precision.
It's about radical transparency. He wanted the government to know exactly who owned every single square foot of land in the empire.
Why was that so important to him?
Because in the past, the rich and powerful would hide their land holdings. They'd bribe the local officials to keep their estates off the books so they wouldn't have to pay taxes.
Which meant the entire tax burden fell on the poor peasants,
crushing them. Fu Hongwu saw this firsthand as a beggar, so he said, no more. He forced all the land into the light. The fish scale records made it impossible to hide.
So he fundamentally shifts the tax burden from the poor to the rich.
Which, naturally, makes the rich and powerful gentry hate him.
But he doesn't care. He hates them right back, especially the merchants.
Let's talk about the merchant hate. Because from a modern perspective, if you're building an empire, don't you want robust trade? Don't you want a bustling commercial economy?
Not if you're a strict Confucian traditionalist, which is how he positioned himself. In that worldview, society has a very rigid hierarchy of value.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Scholars are at the top because they provide moral and intellectual guidance to govern the state. Farmers are next, held in high esteem because they produce food, which is essential value. Artisans are third because they also make useful things.
And merchants.
They are at the very bottom. Below artisans, they're seen as parasitic.
Parasitic, that's a strong word.
Because they don't make anything. They just move goods from one place to another and profit from the labor of others. In his mind, they were leeches on the productive body of the state.
So he's trying to build this perfect, self-sufficient agrarian utopia. But there's a dark side to all this control, isn't there? The paranoia starts to set in.
It really does. The Hueso military system is the first crack you see.
And explain that.
He makes sure no general can ever have a permanent army that's loyal to him personally. The soldiers are basically a farmer militia. They work their fields in their home districts and only pick up their weapons when there's a war.
And he rotates the commanders constantly.
Exactly. A general is given temporary command over troops he doesn't know for a specific campaign, and then he's moved somewhere else. It makes it almost impossible for anyone to build a personal power base strong enough to challenge the throne.
He's coup-proofing the entire military structure from day one.
But then the paranoia moves from the battlefield into the palace itself. He starts seeing shadows and plots everywhere. And this culminates in the case against his prime minister, Hu Weiyang.
His closest friend and chief advisor. He accuses him of plotting a coup. Was it true?
Well, historians still debate it. The evidence was convenient. But Fu Hongwu certainly believed it was true, and his reaction was completely over the top.
He didn't just execute Hu.
No, he launched a massive purge. Tens of thousands of people associated with Hu or even tangentially connected to him were executed over the next decade. And then he did something unprecedented. He abolished the position of prime minister forever.
That's an incredible move. It's like a modern president saying, I can't trust my chief of staff, so I'm abolishing the position of chief of staff for all future presidents.
He said, the emperor alone must have complete and total authority. He centralizes every last scrap of power directly to himself. He replaces the powerful prime minister with a new group called the Grand Secretaries.
And what were they?
Basically, very smart, very low-ranking administrative assistants. They could give advice, but they had zero power to make decisions. He was now micromanaging an empire of 60 million people all by himself.
Imagine the workload, reading every single report, signing off on every decision, the sheer volume of paper.
It was unsustainable, but he trusted no one at all. And yet there's still this flicker of his old self in there. There's that amazing anecdote about the scholar who comes to criticize him.
Oh, the coffin anecdote. I love this one. It's so telling.
It perfectly captures the two sides of his personality. A Confucian scholar wants to submit a memorial, a formal criticism of the emperor's harsh policies.
A move that is, generally speaking, a death sentence.
Right. So this scholar, he brings his own coffin with him to the court. He leaves it right outside the throne room doors before he goes in to deliver his critique.
He's literally saying, I am ready to die for telling you this truth.
In Fu Hongwu's reaction, he spares him. He is genuinely impressed by the sheer, raw courage it took to do that. He respected bravery, he respected principle, even when it was directed against him. What he could not tolerate was betrayal.
And he tries to build a system that reflects that. He creates the Daminglu, the legal code for the dynasty, and he gives his ministers one simple instruction.
No loopholes.
He wanted the law to be like computer code. If X happens, then Y is the punishment. No room for interpretation, no judge's discretion.
Because discretion, in his mind, was just another word for corruption.
And to be fair to him, the text points out that he did improve the legal status of slaves. In the previous Tang dynasty, a slave was legally classified like a domestic animal. If you killed your slave, it was like breaking a piece of furniture.
But under his code, slaves were granted legal protection as human beings for the first time. So even in the depths of his paranoia, he's still thinking about the people at the very bottom of the social pyramid.
But eventually, the weight of being the absolute ruler, of trusting no one, it takes its toll. And this moves us to part 4, the turn.
He's been on the throne for 30 years. He's an old man. He's tired. And he looks out at the people he saved, the empire he built, and he doesn't like what he sees.
This is the midlife crisis of a god king.
It's a crisis of profound cynicism. He writes in the journal about the sweat of my brow and the blood from my wounds. He feels he sacrificed his entire life, his humanity, to build this peaceful, prosperous world for them.
And the new generation, the ones who grew up in that peace.
He sees them as soft. He calls them decadent, lazy, and immoral.
It's that classic, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men trope. But he's taking it incredibly personally. He thinks because they aren't suffering, they're becoming worthless.
He genuinely believes that without the crucible of pain, the kind of soul-crushing pain he went through in the mud, they can't develop any real character. He looks at his own sons, his own ministers, who have only known the luxury of the palace, and he despises them for their comfort.
So he decides they aren't worth serving anymore. He decides to retire.
But emperors don't get to retire to Florida and play golf.
No. The job has one exit strategy, and it's a coffin.
That's the rule. So he decides he has to break the rule. He fakes his own death.
The text claims the grand funeral in 1398 was a magnificent piece of theater.
A final grand performance.
Yeah.
An empty casket. He slips away into the shadows, leaving his grandson to deal with the inevitable mess of succession. He sheds the identity of a Hongwu emperor like a snake shedding its skin.
And this brings us to the strangest part of the story. Part 5, the alchemist. He's free, he's anonymous, and he has a new, singular obsession.
Immortality. But this is where Kinqade's text really emphasizes the scientific or proto-scientific approach. Fu Hongwu isn't looking for a magic spell. He isn't praying to gods he doesn't believe in. He becomes a researcher, a biohacker.
Where does he go to conduct this research?
He travels the world. Tibet, India, Arabia, Persia, Egypt. He's a man of immense hidden wealth and unlimited time. He gathers knowledge from every corner of the known world, studying medicine, chemistry, biology.
And the dark arts, as the text calls them, venoms, poisons, toxins.
He becomes an expert in how things die in order to learn how to live. And he specifically rejects the folly of previous Chinese emperors who sought immortality by drinking elixirs made of mercury or gold.
Which, of course, just poisoned and killed them faster.
Right. He realized that was idiocy. He focuses on organic chemistry, plant derivatives, narcotics, sedatives, a deep study of anatomy and physiology.
And does it work?
The text says his success was limited but sufficient. He doesn't find a magic pill that makes him a god. Instead, he creates a complex regimen.
A maintenance program.
Exactly. A constant series of treatments, injections, and elixirs derives from rare ingredients that he must take on a strict schedule. But it works. It halts his aging process. It keeps him youthful and healthy. It buys him the one thing he truly needs: time.
So now you have a man with the strategic genius of a founding emperor, the hidden wealth of a dynasty, and unlimited time. What does he become? Does he become a philosopher? A hidden sage guiding humanity from the shadows?
No. And this brings us to the final, most disturbing transformation. Part 6. The Shadow King. Or, as he eventually comes to call himself, Dr. Fu Hongwu.
He re-enters the world, but he doesn't try to save it again. He decides to exploit it.
After centuries of solitude and research, he wants luxury. He wants to indulge all the desires he suppressed when he was that hardworking, ascetic emperor. He wants the best food, the best wine, the most beautiful women. He wants to live a life of pure sensory pleasure.
But that kind of lifestyle costs money. A lot of money. And he can't just tax people anymore.
And he emerges into a world that is completely changed. He realizes the old power structure is gone. The landowners, the agrarian class he championed, they aren't the real power players anymore.
It's the merchants, the
Yeah.
businessmen, the capitalists, the very class he despised as parasitic.
And what does he do? Does he fight them?
He adapts. He joins them.
He drops his Confucian morals in an instant. They are an obsolete operating system. He adopts a new philosophy, one fit for the modern world. Trade has become war.
Trade has become war. He embraces the very thing he hated. He becomes the ultimate merchant.
But not in legitimate goods like grain or silk. He looks for the industries with the highest profit margins, the least regulation, and the most control over human desire.
The vices, gambling, prostitution, and above all, the opium trade.
Precisely. He applies his old military ruthlessness, the same strategic mind that won the Battle of Lake Poyang, to the criminal underworld. The text says he takes over the existing gangs and secret societies, the triads and the tongs, with brutal efficiency.
So the man who once spent the state treasury to free slaves is now running global drug and human trafficking rings? The man who protected the peasants is now profiting from their addictions. How does a person justify that to themselves? How do you look in the mirror after that kind of moral reversal?
He doesn't see it as a reversal. He sees it as an evolution. He adopts a philosophy of complete moral nihilism. He claims to have risen above the illusion of duality.
Duality, as in good and evil, right and wrong.
Exactly. He says those concepts are for mortals. They no longer apply to him. He sees history as an endless repeating cycle of folly. He says, quote, mankind seems to be much the same as he has always been.
So he's seen it all before. Empires rise, empires fall, people suffer, people prosper. And after watching it loop for 600 years, he's just emotionally checked out.
Imagine watching your favorite movie 600 times in a row. By the end, you're not feeling the emotions of the characters anymore. You're just noticing the technical details, the patterns. That's how he sees us. He's seen the same wars, the same greed, the same mistakes over and over again. His empathy has completely burned out.
He stops seeing people as humans.
He sees them as resources, or as scenery, or as customers for his vices. He becomes the ultimate predator, perfectly adapted to the system.
He builds this criminal empire that spans centuries, using a series of aliases mentioned in the text. Ming Dynasty, the Beggar King, Wang Dahan, the elusive shadow, the ghost.
He centralizes international crime, just like he centralized the Chinese government. He brings his own brutal form of order to the chaos of the underworld.
It's such a tragic, perfect irony. The man who invented the fishtail records to ensure fairness and transparency is now running the global opium trade, which thrives on secrecy and chaos.
He traded the mandate of heaven for the mandate of profit. And he gives himself a final name, the one the world supposedly knows him by now, Dr. Fu Hongwu.
So if we step back and look at the entirety of this secret biography, what's the ultimate warning here? Is it a story about how power corrupts? Is it about the danger of living too long?
I think it's about the fundamental connection between mortality and morality.
Unpack that for me.
Fu Hongwu was a good man, or at least a man driven by a sense of justice, when he was vulnerable, when he was starving, when he was a soldier fighting for his life. He had empathy. He understood suffering because he could suffer, and more importantly, because he knew he would die. His time was limited.
But as he gained absolute power and then achieved a form of immortality, he lost that tether to humanity.
Because he had no skin in the game anymore.
Right.
If you live forever, why would you care about climate change? You can just outwait any disaster. Why would you care about the suffering of a single generation? They're just a blip on your timeline. Immortality in this telling doesn't make him a god, it makes him a sociopath.
It's the ultimate detachment. He's the puppet master. Because to him, we're all just wooden dolls. We break, we rot, and he can just get a new set.
And that's the real horror of the document. It suggests that our capacity for good, our humanity, is inextricably tied to the fact that our time here is finite. Take that away, and you get Dr. Fu Hongwu.
It reminds me in a strange way of how we sometimes talk about the ultra-wealthy today. People who have so many resources that they effectively live in a different reality from the rest of us. They build bunkers, they buy private islands. They're trying to achieve a kind of escape velocity from the problems of the world.
That's a very apt comparison. The text describes him wanting luxury and indulgence, which he funds by running these vast criminal empires. It's the ultimate extraction of wealth from the system without any contribution to the social good.
He went from creating the yellow records to guarantee fairness for the poor to running the opium trade to guarantee their destruction.
It's a complete inversion of his original purpose. It's the anti-hero's journey. Or maybe just the villain's origin story, fully and terrifyingly realized.
And his justification is so chilling. He says he saw that good men were trampled on by evil men, so he decided that since the world is cruel, he had to become crueler than anyone else just to survive and thrive.
If you can't beat 'em, join 'em. But on a supernatural, centuries-long scale, he adopts the tactics of the very barbarians he once fought to save his people from.
And he haunts history with all these different names, but the one that sticks out is the Ghost.
Because that's what he is. He's the remnant of a past era that refuses to fade away, imposing his ancient, cynical will on the present.
Well, that is a terrifying thought to end on. Whether you believe Dixon Kincade's source is a genuine leaked document or just an incredible piece of speculative fiction, the psychological profile it paints is absolutely haunting.
It certainly makes you look at the forever leaders and timeless institutions of our own world a little differently, doesn't it?
It really does. A huge thanks to everyone for listening to this deep dive into the secret biography of Fu Hongwu. It has been a wild ride from the 14th century all the way to the modern day.
It was a pleasure to walk through the shadows with you on this one.
Before we sign off, here's a final thought for you to take away. The source claims this man is still out there, watching empires rise and fall, indifferent to it all. So ask yourself this. If you never had to answer to history because you were history, would you still try to be good?
Or would you eventually just start playing the game only for yourself?
Or, after centuries of seeing the same patterns repeat, would you just get bored and decide to burn the whole board down just to see what happens next?
Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next deep dive.